Hey everybody, it's Michael. Today I want to talk about how to read a Judy Niemeyer QUILTWORX pattern. We'll go from the front page to the back page and talk about everything in between. If you enjoy this content, please like, subscribe, and get notified. And you can always find out more about me at michaelquilts.com. Follow me on social media, Michael Quilts on Facebook, michael.quilts on Instagram. Okay, so one of the most intimidating things for those who have not done a QUILTWORX pattern before is just how to read the pattern and to not get confused about what you're reading. Okay, so I've just pulled this pattern off the shelf. Okay, it came in a plastic bag here. And on the cover, I see a sample of the quilt. And this one has 3 samples. It lists what each one are, what fabric was used out of it. But our main image here is the star anise. That's the fabric line. This is the pattern. So on the back, this says Antique Lighthouse star anise. So this fabric chart talks about exactly what was used to make this sample here. Okay. Now, the other thing on the back is it's going to give you our quilt size. It's going to tell you what newsprint pages are inside your pattern, meaning which foundation paper sheets and template layout sheets and things that correspond to the pattern. You're going to have a graphic here that I can teach you how to read later. But one thing that I want you to look at is you're going to have a print date here and a QR code. This is when you take your phone and you scan that QR code. And let's just do it now. I'm going to use my camera and go to the link. And it's going to pull up the website of this particular pattern. So there's my Antique Lighthouse right there. And what I want you to see is over here to the right, there's a box called Corrections. And they're dated. And on this one that I see right now, I'm looking at, I see some corrections here from 2022 and 2023. So this pattern was printed 5/3/23. I'm going to look here. If I see anything that was corrected after 5/3/23, then I need to look at it. And I do see one. One of them says 8/31/2023. So it says that TRP lines for Group J, page 8 and 9. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to pull up a PDF. This is a 2-page PDF. You print this and you put these pages into your pattern. You replace them. So it's going to replace page 8 and page 9. Okay, so that's the first thing we do is look for corrections. And I just did that. So on my desktop, I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to print those out and I will put them in my pattern as replacement pages. But that's what you're looking for here, okay? All right, back to the pattern itself. Let's open it up. You're going to get a stack of newsprint, and I'll teach you how to read the different newsprint pages. Then you're going to get on the first page, this is our title page and some general information. So, one of the very first things that I do, even though it was listed back here on the back cover, it tells us what newsprint is in your pattern. It's also listed right here. Okay, so it says that I'm going to need 1 page of NP 744, 1 page of NP 745, and 1 page of NP 817. So basically what I'm telling you, when you're reading the pattern, you just want to make sure you have everything that you need. And this is where I would look. Okay, so I see in front of me NP 8744. Says I'm supposed to have 1 page of this. Let's look at it this way. And I have that. Now, NP 745. It said that right here. And I do have that. Okay, now these are just folded. So there's an NP 744 and a 745. I have it. And now I also have an NP 817. And it says that I'm supposed to have that. So I do have all 3. Great. All right, so I'm going to set those aside for a second. All right, so let's go back now to how to read this. In the general information, it's going to tell us something about the pattern. Well, hey, Antique Lighthouse is constructed using 3 sections. There's a J, that has 8 center diamonds, a G is a pieced border, and a B is an outer border. So it's just kind of giving you some general information about what's going to happen. And you can see that on the back. Okay, so I see that back here. And here's that J group that it talked about. It said you're going to have 8 diamonds. Here's the G group, which is your background. And then there's the border right there. Okay, so we got that. It's going to tell us about the newsprint that we just looked at, and there's a difference sometimes between NPs and TPs, and that means how they're labeled. These all say NP, but I'm going to tell you what's in those, what they include later. This is another place where you can find corrections. It's the same thing as what you found on the back of the pattern here, but the back of the pattern has your print date, so I like you to do it here on the back. Now, we're going to talk about just the general supply list now, or she is in her pattern. And this is true after you get through this first part that talks about which specific newsprint is in this pattern. Now we go to some general information. So, supply list, it talks about an iron, an ironing board, a cutting board, rulers, scissors, etc. It talks about the paper piecing supply list, which I just had a separate video that I made all about the different supplies that you're going to come across. Under definition, common tools and terms here, these also go over some of the supplies we just talked about, some extra things. This is about a curved diamond cutting and trimming ruler, which we did talk about, some curved rulers. We talk about different glues here. We talk about pins. She talks about the fold templates, which we went over, which could be the plastic, or it may be something like a hard copper or brass, or maybe a placemat or a cutting board that's real thin. But anyway, the plastics. We talk about the flower pins. Now, it says here, it talks about what's the sewing lines on your foundation papers and the dashed lines. So what it's telling you here is that on our foundation papers that we use to sew, let's just look at one. It says in the instructions that the sewing lines are numbered and they're in chronological order, and they happen to be solid lines. So this says line 1, this says line 2, line 3, line 4, line 5, etc. And they're solid lines, and the name of the line is right above the line. Okay, and then it talks about the dash lines and what those are, and that's for marking your seam allowances. They're not sewing lines. They're for placement. So that's what the dash lines are for. So always remember the solid lines are for the action that you do, whether it be sewing or folding. The dash lines are only for placement. Okay, so she talks about that right there on the page. This is all general information that once you understand it and you've been through enough patterns, you could kind of just skip through this. It talks about sew sides. That will become important. If you'll see right here, I have what's called a template layout sheet, which is for our fabrics, for cutting out our fabrics. And once we cut out our fabrics, there's going to be something that says sew side on the paper. And we're going to use that sew side as part of the process that I'll explain to you later. Okay, but that's what sew sides are. Right side of the pattern, also referred to as the front side. So with all of the printing, that's the right side of the pattern. The wrong side of the pattern is the right side of the fabric. Okay, so this is the right side of the pattern, and we can see all the lines and sew on it, but when we're finished, the wrong side of the pattern will have the right side of the fabric. So we'll have pretty fabric on the opposite side when we're finished. Okay, Ziploc bags. I talked about that in our video about all of the different kind of supplies that we need. So you might be using a clear plastic Ziploc bag or other brand, or maybe you're using one of these vinyl mesh bags that you can see through that has a zipper, a little more substantial bag. Whatever it is, you'll have some bags. All right, next, It talks about foundation strip piecing. This is a certain technique that's found in some of the patterns. This one doesn't have it. Talks about foundation paper piecing, which that's what we're doing. Allows for perfect points and seam allowances. Allows you to piece intricate quilting designs, etc. She talks about floating points here, which are that when we have points in most of her patterns, they don't go all the way to the edge, to the seam allowance. They will stop prior to that so that you won't have the opportunity to cut them off. So therefore, they're floating. That's the term that we're talking about. Cutting techniques. It just talks about how we will cut out our template layout sheets and our foundation papers. There's a certain methodology to it, but that will come across when we're actually doing a project. There are stacking techniques, which you'll see in the pattern instructions of how we stack our pieces of fabric that we're going to foundation paper piece. There's curved piecing. And it talks about how we're going to use the curved piecing and the TRP lines, which right here are called registration points technique, transitional reference points, and what that means. It comes to play in curved piecing, sometimes in straight piecing too. And then curved line paper piecing. That's a technique where we use a basting stitch and we're able to foundation paper piece a curved seam. Smart corners. So you've seen this where dog ears are automatically trimmed off. These are techniques. So in the actual cutting of the pattern pieces and the foundation papers, in most of the new patterns, there are smart corners. And some of the old patterns, they may not be. But that allows you to line things up easily when you sew them together. Layout groups. This just talks about how this quilt is divided into 3 different groups and what they're labeled. It helps when we get to the assembly process, how she labels layout groups. Okay, now we come to another section. Again, this is all general information that's pretty much the same for every pattern. So eventually you just kind of skip over it unless you need to go back and refresh your memory. Preparing the foundation papers. So it talks about how she wants you to cut out your foundation papers. Now, on your newsprint, I'll go ahead and show you this now, because our next section says templates and template layout sheets. So there's 2 different things you'll find on newsprint. This is newsprint. This is a template layout sheet. This is a template layout sheet. There's another one over here. Basically, you're looking at this shape. There's a bold outside line, and that will correspond to a strip of fabric that you put this on top of. And then you will cut your fabrics out on these inner lines. So when you're preparing this at the beginning, just to get your template layout sheets cut out of the newsprint, you'll cut those on the solid line. Okay, so that's the preparation process. We'll talk about cutting fabric later, but to prepare our newsprint, template layout sheets get cut on the solid outside line. All right, foundation papers. These are foundation papers. One way to tell that they are is because they'll have the name unit, whatever, GL, in bold capital letters. Okay, so that is one major clue when you're saying, well, I don't know if this is a foundation paper or if it's a template layout sheet. Well, this is a foundation paper because it's got a bold unit name right there. Then it also has a series of lines that are labeled line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, etc. Next to those are dashed lines. Okay, so on these template layout sheets, you might say, well, Michael, there's lines on this too. And it says cut line 1, cut line 2. But if it says cut line, it's for cutting out fabric. If it just says line number 1, it's for sewing. So these are not the same. This is a template layout sheet. It does not have bold capital unit names. And it also says template layout sheet on it. So you know it's a template layout sheet because that's what it says. And it also talks about cut, this one happens to say cut 4-inch by 42-inch strip. So that should clue you in that they're talking about there's fabric, a fabric strip that goes underneath there. Foundation papers don't say that. Okay. So foundation papers get cut about 1/8 of an inch around the outside. Okay, again, template layout sheets, cut those on the line. All right, when it comes to T templates, which is a slightly different thing than template layout sheets, first of all, this one, there's a big dashed line, and you're going to cut that out a certain way. But once we get to cutting out each piece, when you have fabric under it, T templates are going to get cut exactly on the line. Now, I know I told you to cut your template layout sheets on the line. If you got off a little bit, it's okay. T templates, that's not okay. Think of this as traditional template. That's what the T is for. As if this needs to be cut like a traditional template made out of plastic or cardboard or whatever, because it's the exact shape of a piece of fabric, and it will become something that sews to something else as that exact shape. When you're cutting exactly on the line here, you're still going to be cutting this apart because it's going to be pieces of fabric. So it has a little wiggle room. T templates don't. So T template, cut exactly on the line. Template layout sheets, cut on the line. If you get off, it's okay. Foundation papers, cut 1/8 of an inch away from the outside line. All right. I know that's a lot of talking, but that is what preparing the foundation papers is all about. And it says what the template and template layout sheets are, etc. Why the extra seam allowance? That's just saying on some of the templates, you're going to have this dashed line represents the seam allowance that you need. And then you're going to have extra here in the template. That gives you a little wiggle room, and it makes the process go faster. Okay, so all of this is just what I was just talking about. It talks about the traditional templates up here, the T templates, like I just told you about. Now, there are other things called strip piecing templates. We don't have that in this particular pattern. When I teach a project that has it, I will tell you what that's about. But basically, there's a strip piecing method that's unlike what you may think about strip piecing, which may be that you create a strip set and then cut it apart. This is a different method in which strips are sewn onto foundation papers in a very fun way. Okay, but we're not doing that now. Okay, general fabric information. Quiltworx bases everything on a 42-inch wide fabric. Some fabrics might be wider. Every once in a while, you might get a little shorter, but that's the general idea. Okay, and when we talk about strips, when she says how many strips you need of what size, we're talking about the width of the fabric. So if she says you need 2 5-inch strips, she means that you need 2 strips that are 5 inches by 42 inches, the width of the fabric. Okay, so that's basically about the fabric here and following instructions about how to cut it. Understanding your yardage, it's just what I told you about. Everything will be rounded up to the nearest eighth as far as yardage calculation. So when we go back here, if it says 3/4 of a yard, it might be slightly less because it was rounded up to the nearest eighth. Okay, that's about the yardage. Then we start talking about the fabric references. Fabrics are named for each group. So within a group, you might have several fabrics. Let's say that you're working with group J. So you're going to have fabrics that are named J something, J1, J2, J3, J4. And they correspond to that group, isolated. So you keep that isolated. Group G is going to have its own set of fabric numbers. It might be G1, G2, G3, G4. And that doesn't mean that the same fabric might not appear in either group, because it might. But when you're talking about constructing the J group, it's a J name. When you're talking about constructing the G group, it's a G name. And I'll show you how the fabric charts within each group keep you organized. Okay, we can get more into that later. And the cutting instructions are here, how to cut out your fabric. The basic general piecing instructions talk about the tension, the stitch length, the needle size. So we work with a 1.8 stitch length On our needle size, we like a Microtech Sharp 7010 needle. Thread size should be 50 weight or 60 weight. They're the most common. Different things that fall under piecing instructions, and it goes into a little bit further explanation of the TRP lines, which are reference points. Think of those like notches in garment sewing. They're a way to match things when we go to assembly. Okay, I'm not going to get too in-depth about all of this because I want you to be able to understand how to read the pattern, not how to understand how to do every little thing yet. Okay, she gives us a chain piecing example about how that would make us more efficient. So what you do to one, you do to all. If you're sewing section 1 and you have 8 units, then sew 8 section 1s, then move on to section 2s, then move on to section 3s. Instead of doing one paper at a time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know what I mean? So all of section 1, then all of section 2, that's the method. All right, so that's all of the general instructions. Again, the general information here, the only thing that's not general is right here when it talks about the newsprint and what should be in your pattern and the correction code. Okay, the rest of this is general information all the way until you get to this, Group J. Now we're talking about this pattern specifically. Okay, so as soon as I see that we're talking about a group, I highlight this. This tells me that for the next few pages, all we're talking about is Group J. All we're talking about is how to make this Group J here. Okay, so I'm going to open up my project because I've made this quilt. I made a binder for this pattern before. Okay, so let's open it up. And what happened, as soon as I found Group J, I highlighted it to say, hey, I've got a group here. That means I'm starting something. Right underneath that, it's going to tell me how many bags that I need. It says that I need 2 bags, a J1 and a J2. So the group name is here. It tells me how many bags I need. And then it's going to tell me, it's going to show me what newsprint I need for this group. Okay, so it says I'm going to use NP744 and NP745. So 2 of these pages that were in our packet are going to be used for the J. Okay, and I have those. And this is a visual representation of this exact newsprint. So it's just shrunk down and put on the page. All right, so it shows you exactly what's on there. One thing that it also shows, it says what bag number it goes into after you cut it out. So right there it says bag 2. Right here this says bag 1. So after I cut this out of the newsprint, I'm going to stick it into bag 2. After I cut this out of the newsprint, I'm going to stick it in bag 1. On this it says that these go into bag 1, this goes into bag 2. It's written real small, but it's there. This goes into bag 2, this goes into bag 1, etc. Then you're going to find a fabric chart just for the J group. And it lists the fabrics in order. There's a J1, A, B, C, D. There's a J2. There's a J3, A, B, C, D. Okay, and then you're going to want to put your fabric swatch here. So let's look at mine. Okay, so I put my fabric, sorry about the glare, I'll take it out. I put a fabric swatch for each of my fabrics here so I knew what to do. Okay. All right, so that's with every pattern. First, we start with how many bags. We start with the foundation papers and the template layout sheets needed, and the fabric chart. After your fabric chart, you'll probably get a little graphic. This shows the back side, which is the paper side of all of your fabrics and where they go. Then it's going to tell you how to cut each fabric in order, starting from J1A all the way down to J3D. So it's going to tell you how many strips you need and what template you need to cut the pieces out of. All right, in order. So this is fabric J2. What templates we need to go on it is listed right here, templates 3 and 4. Then it's going to talk about J3, A through D, how many strips we need, what order to put them in, and what template layout sheets we're going to use to cut out our pieces. All right, next talks about stacking. So now we have all our pieces cut out, and it told us to put it in a bag, and now you're ready to sew the bag. So it's going to tell you how to stack it, and it's going to say to put the sew sides facing away from you with the highest number section furthest away and section 1 closest to you. That's how you stack it. This is a graphic representation of exactly how your pieces will look if you cut them out with the template layout sheet. Then it's going to tell you how to foundation paper piece the unit and where to start and how to fold, etc., etc., etc. And it's going to go through all the steps of creating that unit. And then it's going to tell you, like on this one, you're going to sew some TRP lines, and you're going to trim the excess fabric off on the outside line, and then you're going to place these back into the bag. Then it's going to talk about how to stack the J2 unit and exactly how that should look, and it's going to be the highest section number at the back with sew sides facing away all the way down to section 1. How to foundation paper piece that unit. Okay, and it's going to tell you it's just the same as the other unit, but it's a different unit. Okay, then it's going to tell you to leave the paper on until you're ready to assemble. So again, every group, when it starts, is going to tell you how many bags you need, what to label them. It's going to show you your newsprint and where to put your foundation papers and your template layout sheets after you've cut them out. Then it's going to show you your fabric chart. Then it's going to start telling you how to cut the fabrics out, starting from J1 all the way to the last one. So in order of fabric, it's going to tell you how to stack, how to piece the unit, and what to do with it when you're finished. Okay? And then we're going to get to the next group. So the next time you see another group, I highlight it. Let's go through here. I highlighted it. Group G. Rainbow crown border, instructions. Right under group G, I'm going to use this because there's not a glare. It tells me how many bags I need. It tells me that I need 3. I need to label them G1, G2, G3. Then it tells me how to prepare my foundation papers and what they look like. So it's this one piece of newsprint where everything goes when I cut it out. Again, here's a fabric chart. Just like before, I've swatched mine. It's got a reference of how these things are going to look when you when your assembly is done. And then again, it's going to start with fabric G1 in order of how to cut it out. G1 all the way through G4 in order. And then it's going to tell you how to stack it. It's going to tell you how to paper piece it. Okay, so do you see the commonality here? Each group or each round is exactly the same. How many bags do you need? How to cut out the pattern, how to cut out the fabric in order, how to stack it, how to piece it. And that just happens over and over again. Then you're going to get some assembly graphics on how do these things get put together. So once you have the units ready, how does it work? And these graphics are really cool. Okay, so, but in your pattern, you've got all of that too. So anytime you see the arrows, it's sew this to this and press it in that direction. Sew this to this and press it in that direction. And you can see there's nothing sewn here. So you leave that alone for this step. Next, you're going to sew this unit to those that you didn't sew. Then you're going to sew this unit to this unit. Press in that direction, press in that direction. Then you'll sew the quarter. This is a quarter of the quilt, and you'll sew that to the border. Press toward the border. Then you've got 4 seams left. Press in the direction she says, which is in a clockwise manner. And then you're finished. Okay, these are fabric charts for the other 2 cover quilts that wasn't the center. Okay, they just happened to give those to you. And then you get the line drawing and fabric references. Okay, this is the whole quilt. In each spot, it shows you what the fabric number is, and you can follow that along. You can color it. You can just have this as a reference. All right, and that takes you to the end of the pattern. Okay, so again, I'm going to go over the basic points. First thing you do, find your print date, see if you have any corrections to your pattern. Open up your pattern. General information except the newsprint here. Make sure you have the number of newsprint pages that you're supposed to have. If you want to read through any of the general information, it's all right here for you. As soon as you get to the first group, see how many bags you need. See how to cut out your papers and what bags to put them in. Make your fabric chart. Cut your fabrics out in order of fabric number using the template layout sheets that it says in the instructions. Stack your unit. Foundation paper piece your unit. See if there's any assembly that you can do. Next group, number of Ziploc bags. Foundation papers and template layout sheets on the newsprint, fabric chart, a representation of where those fabric numbers go, then how to cut out fabrics, starting with the first fabric and going through, how to stack it, how to foundation paper piece it, how to assemble. That's how you read a Quiltworx pattern. Okay, not bad, huh? I can just thumb through this. Let's see what else. It's just pretty because I've highlighted it and I've got some fabrics in it. And I've labeled some things back here for myself too. Okay. All right. I hope you enjoyed and I hope you learned something.